Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Brew Pub. I'm your host, Michael Camp, and I'm very excited to have David Hayward with us, also known as the Naked Pastor. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great. I am looking forward to this conversation. David is an author, a cartoonist, a former charismatic pastor, including 15 years in the Vineyard ministry. He has a master's of theological studies and years experience in the evangelical movement before he deconstructed. So, David, we have a lot in common. I was involved in the Vineyard ministry and the charismatic movement for many years on the East Coast and in California. And I really resonate with your story, and I love your cartoons. They are very encouraging, inspiring, and I've been using them for years, even in my deconstruction workshop that I have that helps people go through deconstructing, particularly evangelical Christianity, but any conservative Christianity. So
Cool.
We're going to get into your story and what you're doing now and what's your passion and so forth. So I thought we'd get started by asking you, how did you become an evangelical Christian and then eventually a Pentecostal and charismatic pastor? What's that all about?
Yeah, so I call myself my own ecumenical movement because I've just been everywhere. I mean, I was I'm Canadian. I was born in Toronto, Anglican, baptized Anglican as a baby, and my dad was a police officer with the Ontario Provincial Police, and we were transferred all over Ontario, and we ended up going to whatever church was convenient. We weren't really loyal or dedicated to any one denomination, so I never grew up with a sense of loyalty to any one particular church or denominational group or theological standpoint or whatever. But when I became a teenager, I went to a boys' club that was run by a Baptist church, and I ended up getting born again there at the boys' club. And
how old were you then?
I was 15.
Yeah, that's common. Yeah.
And then, we were playing floor hockey and stuff. And
yeah.
And, my conversion was very, unadorned. I was basically handed a tract called The Four Spiritual Laws. And
I remember that one.
I prayed the sinner's prayer, and that was it. It was done.
Yep.
And I then shortly after that, though, after we were at the Baptist church for a while, we switched to Pentecostal. So we switched to a Pentecostal church, the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, which is a sister organization to the Assemblies of God. And then from there, when I went to college, I went to Central Bible College, Springfield, Missouri, which is a Pentecostal Bible college. And then, I became interested in biblical languages. There were biblical scholars there that I really liked, and took as many courses from them as I could. And I took biblical Greek, biblical Hebrew. I ended up going to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary near Boston, and took New Testament studies, more Greek, more Hebrew, Aramaic,
wow,
the whole bit. And long story short, I was going to start my PhD in New Testament studies at Toronto. And I was there about half a year, and then discovered we were pregnant, and I couldn't afford to continue in our studies. I had to make money. And I was offered a deal I couldn't put down, and that was to go and get my MDiv from McGill at Presbyterian College, and I could serve as a student minister in the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and I ended up getting ordained there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and so I was ordained as a Presbyterian minister.
Okay.
And I served the Presbyterian Church for, I say, 7 or 8 years.
Right.
And then switched to Vineyard.
Well, how did you make that switch? That's quite a switch.
Yeah, well, people keep saying, whoa, Baptist to Pentecostal? Wow, how'd you do that? And then Pentecostal to Presbyterian? Wow, how'd you do that? And then Presbyterian to Vineyard? It's the same thing. Like I said, I didn't feel any allegiance to any one denomination. And I found myself gravitating towards churches and ideas that appealed to me and felt like I had room to grow and breathe and develop spiritually. The Pentecostal church, I ran out of space there to grow. I sort of really got into Reformed theology and everything. And then, after serving time in the Presbyterian church, serving time sounds like I
Time,
was.
I was going to say, it felt
Um,
like that, huh?
yeah, sometimes it did. They say you have a choice either with congregations, either spend your time trying to light wet wood on fire or spend your time trying to put the fire out. And,
Right, right, right.
Pentecostals is trying to put the fire out, and with Presbyterians trying to light the fire with wet wood. But so Lisa and I both kind of missed, even though I still had and have an appreciation for Reformed theology. We really missed the sort of down to earth, laissez-faire kind of dress code, more modern music.
Yeah, right. The
More,
vineyard style. Yeah.
yeah, and we found out about the vineyard, and we were invited, and I went, and then a year later I was asked to become the pastor of the church we were going to, and I did. So
Wow.
yeah, it was kind of a series of accidents, happy ones, but
Right.
I ended up becoming a vineyard pastor. Yeah.
So, like your choice of like going to seminary and pursuing this, I mean, what was that all about? I mean, why didn't you just go into, a regular profession? Why did you decide to go to seminary and pursue pastoring?
Well, I wasn't pursuing pastoring. My goal was to be a New Testament scholar. That was what I wanted.
Oh, I see. In the
Yeah.
beginning, it was
So
just to be okay.
my mentor at Gordon Conwell was Dr. Gordon Fee, who was
Oh, I know Gordon Fee. Yeah, I used to like his books. Yep.
yeah. He's
Yep.
since passed away, but
Oh, yeah.
a couple of years ago. But yeah, so he was sort of my role model and what I
Yeah.
wanted to be like. And
Right.
though he would preach, he was Pentecostal too, but he was world renowned as a New Testament textual critic.
Yep.
Where he would really go into the Greek and
Right.
um, exegete it.
Yeah, yeah. He was one of the. I don't know. I may be ignorant about this, but he was one of the few evangelicals that was doing that.
Yeah,
You know,
he
he
was.
wrote a. He.
I wanted, yeah, I wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Right.
Thing,
Right.
and at that time, when I graduated from Gordon Conwell with a master's in New Testament study with all the languages under my belt and all this kind of thing, I I tried hard to find a job in the Pentecostal church to no avail, because this was a while ago. Higher education was still kind of frowned upon. So Dr. Gordon Fee was, um, sort of a very unique kind of a species of
Right.
being a Pentecostal New Testament scholar
Right.
who is respected around the world for his expertise and text criticism.
Right.
And so I sort of wanted to follow in his footsteps, but
So
um,
you maybe become a teacher yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
Okay.
was my goal. I'd started theological French, theological German. I started my papers, more Greek, more Hebrew. I was just going at it because I just love the Bible, and I dove into the deep end of biblical studies,
Right.
and so I was very, very serious about getting my PhD in New Testament,
Oh,
and
that.
then
Yeah.
and then becoming a scholar. But Gordon Fee too, he still preached and taught in churches, including Pentecostal churches. So that sort of had its appeal for me, where often there's a separation between. They say there should be a separation between church and state, but there's also a separation between church and seminary and higher
Yeah.
education often. And I wanted to sort of help bridge that gap. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. That's what I mean. When I talk to people who've been to seminary and so forth, and
hmm
especially people who have deconstructed, um, oftentimes they'll say, yeah, we learned that in seminary, but we didn't have the balls to preach it in church because we might lose our job.
yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the fact of it, that and so there was this sort of love-hate relationship between the seminary and the church.
Right.
And that's always been, the church has always been suspicious of higher learning.
Right.
And, even in the Presbyterian church, when I was going to Presbyterian College at McGill University in Montreal to get my diploma in ministry there, the equivalent of an MDiv,
Mhm.
there was this sort of, the seminary kind of looked down on the church and as ignorant and backward and behind the times, and the church was always suspicious of graduates coming out looking for
Right.
church.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think that's changed.
No, no. I'm sure that's probably the case. So, in your experience as a evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal pastor, what was, what was good about that, and what did you find to be disconcerting about that? What was that experience like for you?
You mean when I was in the vineyard, or?
Yeah, in the vineyard, or well, other churches. Yeah.
So I served Presbyterian churches in the in the country for 5 years. I was a country pastor for 5 years, and then I went and planted a Presbyterian church in a town, and did that for 2 years, and I just hated. I ended up hating my job because I just got so bored with Presbyterian style of,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
and so that Lisa and I were looking. My wife Lisa and I were looking for, is there a way that we can still appreciate good theology, deeper theology, biblical studies, and all that kind of thing, and um, uh, and is there a way that we could embrace that, but still enjoy a more relaxed, passionate kind of a community and worship? And we did find that in the Vineyard Church that we ended up pastoring, where there was this respect for studies and serious theology.
Hmm.
Come to find out, though, it had its limits because Vineyard is strongly evangelical,
Right.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and how to uh, how to enjoy like more contemporary worship and so on.
So what were the limits that you came up against, that, and maybe what was it that pushed you to leave the vineyard as well?
So, like I said, the the Vineyard Church I was pastoring here was very open, and I felt very welcomed. And
Good. Yeah.
uh, I think, though, it was unique to that congregation.
Hmm.
As meeting other vineyard pastors and so on, I found some who were kind of on the same page, but others that were quite a bit more conservative and so on.
Hmm.
But our congregation seemed really adventurous and willing to explore and to grow and to understand more deeply the scriptures and all this kind of thing. And
Hmm.
I felt very comfortable doing that. But over time, I began to, as I was deconstructing
Hmm.
while being a pastor, I realized that even though I thought this was a huge box I was in, I did come to the edge, and
Yeah. Right.
realized that uh, I I really I'd come to that intersection where it would be better for me to go, and it would be better for the church if I went. It was
Right.
sort of that. It became
Right.
just clear that, and we concluded that we were no longer compatible theologically, and I went my way, and the church went its way.
So what were the theological points that you
Well,
were?
it's vague. I know it's vague, but basically, I I had a very profound, like, my deconstruction started when I graduated from seminary, the
Okay.
actual day of my
Right.
graduation, when I began to doubt the inspiration of Scripture.
Right. Okay.
And um,
Do you mean by inspiration? Do you mean Any inspiration or the infallibility?
Yeah, I'm talking about the
Infallibility.
3 I's: infallible, inerrant, and inspired.
Inspired. Okay. Yep.
All those things together.
Hmm.
And I just began to question it, and I wrestled with that because it was very traumatic experience for me, because all of everything I believed, I thought, rested on that
Yes.
assumption or assurance that the Bible was, inspired. And I wrestled with that all the way through my ministry. But in 2009, so that was in 2000, that was in 1980, 1983 that happened.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
a long time ago. Like,
Yeah.
I deconstructed for decades.
You must be older than I am. No, but I got into the movement in '79, and so in the early '80s, I was just early and young and naive. But
Which movement?
the evangelical movement,
Oh,
yeah,
the evangelical movement.
yeah.
Yeah. So then in 2009, I had a very profound sort of a moment where I saw the oneness of all things, or felt the oneness of all things.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I naively began sharing this on my blog, NakedPastor, which I started in 2005.
Oh, you had that you had that name for even while you were still pastoring in the vineyard, huh?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so I was just sort of sharing it. And then, when I felt the oneness of all things and the
Mhm.
connectivity of all things, and
Right.
how this is sort of being suggested by science and quantum physics and philosophy and mystical
Mhm.
theology, and all this kind of thing. It was very exciting for me, and a very profound moment of just sensing this unity of all things. And I started getting letters of concern, and so did headquarters, and
Oh,
all
right. Yeah.
my higher
Yep.
ups started
Yep.
expressing concerns, and I was getting phone calls, and I knew, okay, my time is up. I could feel
Yep.
the jaws closing, and it was a year later I left the ministry.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds very familiar. I mean, for folks who are not or who aren't familiar with the vineyard, I always called it more the most progressive uh, part or stream of evangelicalism. But like you said, there was still a box and there were still limits, and you can always, you know, rub up against those limits, and then you'll find out actually there's a very conservative theology under this progressive kind of hipster veneer. You
Yeah.
know,
So when people say they're not familiar with the vineyard, I say, have you heard of Hillsong?
yes,
They'll say, oh, I've heard of Hillsong. I say, it's kind of like that. It's kind of got
yeah,
that vibe where
yep,
it seems really, really cool and
yep,
really open, and cool music, and, cool, young, vibrant people. And it seems really open and affirming and embracing, and uh, forging ahead, and
right,
where no man
right,
has gone before. But really, it's basically quite conservative evangelical theology mixed with, you know, um, modern, pop music, and uh, miracles, and
yeah, right. And there were actually
stuff.
there were other movements that were similar to the vineyard. I went to one called People of Destiny for a while, but we used to go over when I lived in Pasadena. We'd go over and visit John Wimber's church in Anaheim,
Yeah, yeah,
and the mothership, so to speak, of the vineyard. And it was exciting for us young evangelicals who were like, yeah, we don't want the mainstream, traditional style. And it was great. And they had a lot of great music, a lot of great people. But like you said, it was the theology that you run up against that eventually a lot of people um, leave because of that.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's very interesting. Um, you've written a lot about and done cartoons a lot about deconstructing. Maybe share a little bit about what it was like to you to deconstruct the theology that that you realized, this is too
Mhm.
confining for me.
I I started, like, I was invited to a while I was a vineyard pastor. I was invited to a workshop a weekend workshop on hermeneutics. And there was a Bible scholar going to be there, a theologian, and teaching. And we were given a list of books to read in preparation for this workshop. And they
Mhm.
were all to do with hermeneutics.
Mhm.
And it included critiques of the the French philosophical school deconstruction that was
Okay.
founded by Jacques Derrida. He invented
Mhm.
the word deconstruction.
All right.
So while I was reading these books on deconstruction, and they were trying to warn me about it, I actually realized I loved it.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
had the total reverse effect on me.
Right. Okay.
It just seemed to be describing exactly what was happening with my spiritual life, and it
Right.
was like an
Right.
aha moment for me.
Right.
And I decided to co-opt the word deconstruction and use it in reference to spiritual development. And so for me, deconstruction isn't a phase. To me, deconstruction is a way of life. And I
Mhm.
compare it to, like, so I'll deconstruct until the day I die, because basically for me it's asking questions and
Mhm.
taking apart things that naturally crystallize over time or gain weight, or the gravitational pull towards falling into a rut or whatever. For me, I compare it to Marie Kondo, the Japanese minimalist who teaches us how to throw away things or give things away and keep that which only brings joy.
Mhm.
Decluttering your house.
Yeah.
I
Right. Okay.
use that same analogy to spirituality, where we Marie Kondo our faith. We just get rid of all of the clutter, and we just strip it all down to the absolute essential. And to me, that's a beautiful place to be. It's
Yeah.
spacious,
Right.
it's open, it's tidy, it's clean, it's uncomplicated, it's uncluttered. And but that we have to constantly be doing that, because we inevitably, just like we do in our houses, we collect stuff. And so for me, I'm constantly decluttering, because we live in an age when we're constantly being thrown information, opinions, and we're constantly find ourselves forming new opinions and becoming certain about different things. And
Mhm.
for me, it's like we need to constantly be questioning these assumptions that we have. It's kind of like in science. Whenever somebody makes a scientific claim, the underwritten disclaimer is that it's falsifiable. And
Yeah.
so that I apply that to theology and to
Yeah.
spirituality. No matter where we end up, we have to understand there's this disclaimer that this is falsifiable, and we may discover that we need to go deeper and
Right.
declutter
Yeah.
even.
Right. Oh, that makes perfect sense. There's so much. I mean, when I deconstruct it, one of the main things I learned was actually Jesus was deconstructing. He was deconstructing the retributive, uh, punitive narratives in the Torah and other Jewish scriptures, and he was pulling out things from the scriptures, from the prophets, and other sources that were actually restorative, and he was making a distinction. And I think what you're describing sounds to me like, to get the clutter out, let's find the let's let's identify some things that are either not true or harmful, and just keep the stuff that's helpful and healthy,
Yes,
and
yeah,
you know
yeah,
and make that, and focus on what matters most, which to me
right,
is the love ethic. But
yeah, or the love hermeneutic.
love
I
human.
cartoon
Okay.
about that quite a bit, and upset a lot of people in so doing. But
What do you
I
mean by the love human hermeneutic?
I had one of my cartoons. It's one of my more popular ones, actually, both for fans and for enemies. Is Jesus is talking to a group of people who have their Bibles with them, and he says, "The difference between me and you is you search the scriptures to find out." Sorry.
That's
Um,
right. We've got a ding. That's okay.
I don't know if you edit this stuff out, but anyway, I have a cartoon where Jesus is talking to a group of people with Bibles under their arms. And he says, the difference between me and you is you use the scriptures to try to figure out what love means. I use love to figure out what the scriptures mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by the love hermeneutic.
Yeah. That's perfect. I have that cartoon in my workshop. Yeah. So I love that one. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yep. Yeah. So when we talk, I have one session about how the Bible was compiled. And we talk about the two different ways of looking at scripture, so yeah, and that's excellent. I love that. But yeah, there's kind of there's a worship of the Bible that's going on, and it gets so black and white, all or nothing.
Yeah.
There's no nuance, and there's nothing, they don't let you doubt anything in the Bible, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I used to be there, and that was me many moons ago. When I started to realize that the Bible isn't in what I thought it was, or inspired or infallible or inerrant like I thought it was. That it's like an onion. There's just so many layers.
Right.
Like down when we do say Jesus said, we can't really honestly say that. What we can say is somebody who claims to be Luke said Jesus said. So there's that kind of, that's what Jacques Derrida did for any kind of hermeneutics or any kind of text.
Right.
You really have to unwrap all of that. And if the one saying they were Luke were anti-Semitic, we're going to find anti-Semitism throughout. So there's all kinds of layers to understanding or trying to get at the historical Jesus, right?
Exactly. And the other part of it is when I talk about the love ethic, I'm talking about that teaching on love that actually, to me and to many people, is very inspirational. And so it's like, okay, what did Jesus actually say? Well, the other question is, what is actually really inspirational and what's ugly, and if you focus on what's really seems like very inspirational, then you kind of start looking at it very differently. What rises to the top and what sinks to the bottom,
right?
And what should we be focused on?
Yeah,
if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it's like with the LGBTQ reality, there's people often come at me with the Bible says, or the Bible clearly says, but the Bible clearly doesn't say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two approaches to it. Let's unwrap what that verse is saying. Let's try to get to what was said and what it means, and so on and so. We can do that. Continue, and scholars will debate scriptures till the end of time, what they mean, and so on.
Right.
Especially like the clobber verses that are against the LGBTQ community.
Right.
But there's another approach too, and that is we recognize what the Bible is as a collection of the writings of people doing their best to explain a profound mystery that they maybe saw or experienced or whatever. And so, one thing Lisa and I promised that we wouldn't do was we wouldn't stone our kids for picking up sticks on the Sabbath.
Right.
And, we didn't have to go back and unwrap that verse and reinterpret it and try to figure out what it really meant.
Right. Yeah.
But that just doesn't make sense for us today.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. You just have to call it like it is sometimes. So let's pivot a little bit. You've got this great profession of being a cartoonist and drawing cartoonists, deconstruction cartoons, or whatever you call them. And I'll put some examples, links in the show notes so people can see it. But how did you come to, this idea of using cartoons to help people question certain doctrines and beliefs and practices in the conservative church or in, Christianity in general?
It's kind of weird. I grew up in a home where there was art hanging on the walls. My dad was a painter on the side. So I grew up drawing and sketching and painting, I don't ever remember not drawing.
Right.
And so it's always been there. And I've painted all through my life, paintings, and sold them or given them away or whatever. But I always loved a really good cartoon, especially one frame cartoon with as few words as possible. And so like my gold standard would be like a New Yorker cartoon.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Or, The Far Side, or,
Mm-hmm.
cartoons like this that are just one frame, very simple, and punchy. And so I just have always loved those. And I also was following a cartoonist, and online. He had a blog, and I was following his cartoons, and he challenged himself to draw a cartoon every day. And they were just really cool. And one day I thought, why don't I try to, I've been
Yeah.
running a blog, writing posts and sharing my paintings and stuff, but I thought, why don't I see if I can draw a cartoon and see what happens? And I challenged myself to draw a cartoon every day until I ran out of ideas. I thought I might last a couple weeks. That was
Oh, but the ideas kept coming, huh?
2006. So,
Wow.
yeah, I keep drawing cartoons every day. So, and I have
Wow.
almost, I think, 5,000 cartoons to date. But yeah, it just resonated with people. I think there's a real, I don't know, immediacy to a cartoon. Like, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it really does act that way, where people don't have to read an entire blog post. They can get my point in one frame in 1 second.
No, that's true.
And, it's very, very fast and very efficient. So, and
Yeah.
fun to draw.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I love. I'll share one of the cartoons that I like that really I related to was, um, this guy. So this person is walking down the street with Jesus, and they seem to be big, nice big pals, and then Jesus says something like, I'll see you around or something, and the person's headed toward the corner, and around the corner is this church trap. Remember that one? So like, and with a little string. So when he gets around the corner, they're going to pull the string and the church is going to come over him and trap him. And I was like, that's what happened to me.
Yeah,
So that,
yeah. There's two cartoons in there, actually. There's one where a woman's saying goodbye to Jesus, and she's going
yes,
around,
there's another one like that. Right.
and
Yeah.
the church has a butterfly net, and
Yeah.
the church is
Yeah.
going to
Okay. Right. I haven't seen that one, but the one I use is the one when the
that,
guy's going around the corner.
that one. There's people walking up to a church, and it's up on a stick,
Yeah.
fork
Yeah.
stick. People are behind the church with a string and
Right.
a stick, but there's hearts underneath in the church, like bait.
Yes. Like
And
bait. That's right.
saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
look, unconditional love."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's happened to a
That's
lot.
another thing. Yeah. There's love bombing going on, and then
Yeah,
you get trapped in the box. Right.
yeah,
But I think that's powerful. That's the powerful thing about your cartoons is that people can relate. That happened to me.
yeah,
I understand that. And sometimes you're like so spot on. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me.
yeah.
It's like, okay, this guy knows what's going on in my life. So that's wonderful. And they really have helped a lot of people. And like you said, they just, in a very short glimpse, you just kind of get this epiphany or something that is very meaningful. So it's
Well, that's
powerful.
great. Well, then
Yeah.
it's working. That's perfect.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely. So, I'm wondering, what, as you're using these cartoons and you're writing to help people deconstruct, um, what are some of the hardest things that you think people are, up against?
Hmm.
Where do they struggle the most? And, how are you determining what that is and deciding to do a cartoon on that?
Okay, I think there's two main ones. One is interior and the other's exterior. So the interior one is fear. And when you've put all your eggs in one basket, or all your money on one horse, with your faith or your church or your beliefs or whatever, and then they start to crumble. That's
Hmm.
a very terrifying experience.
Yes.
Um, it you know you don't think you believe in hell, but you're afraid you're going to go to hell because you don't believe in hell, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It really messes with your brain.
It does.
But it's terrifying because what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
And I was on a podcast last week where the guy was like, well, David, like, what if you're wrong? And
Yeah.
it can be very, very terrifying. And I've been
Right.
going through this now for decades. And even that one question, what if you're wrong? It can still feel it a little bit,
Yeah.
but,
Right.
but I think it's because fear is such a powerful weapon that religion uses to manage us. Validly, the church wants to manage us. Religion wants to manage people, and fear is a powerful way to do that. And, threatening with hell or demons or disappointing God or being cut off from the community, or there's all kinds of fears attached to that. And so that's one of the big ones, I think, is
That
people
is big. Yep. Mm-hmm.
exteriorly,
Fear-based faith.
it's
Yep.
loneliness.
I'm sorry.
Exteriorly, it's loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
People leaving the church and missing the community. And that's, I think, one of the biggest pain points people feel when they start questioning their beliefs and questioning their relationship to religion and the church. I think most people embarking on deconstruction intuitively know this is going to hurt because it's going to put their relationships at risk. And it often does, unfortunately. And so that's what I think I'm dealing with mostly with people and trying to encourage them. Hey, the fear will pass,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to learn how to make friends. and,
Right. New friends. Right.
and
Yeah.
new friends. And because we were never taught that. Because when you go into a church, they're served to you on a silver platter. There's
Yeah.
no effort involved.
Yeah. No, it's true. One of the things I noticed about when I help people deconstruct and look at my own journey is that oftentimes people are deconstructed. I called it a mini deconstruction. Like 3 years in, I was
Yeah.
questioning the doctrine of hell when I went to Africa and met all these beautiful people, and I fell in love with them, and they happened to be Muslims, and my theology was telling me they're all going to go to hell unless they accept Jesus, but then their ancestors are already in hell because they didn't accept Jesus. And and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense.
That's how it
And
happened to me too. Yeah.
yeah. So I deconstructed that, but I didn't become a universalist until later. But you don't share that with anyone because you're going to rock the boat, and you're afraid to bring it up with anyone.
Yeah.
Right. Because you've heard the sermons, you went to the Bible studies, and you know what people think about this. And if you brought it up, you would look like an idiot. You're afraid. Maybe they
Yeah.
would criticize you. They would kick you out of the church, or you might lose some friends. Who knows, so
Yeah.
you don't say anything. And then after time goes by, usually people deconstruct because they, something very painful or emotional happens in their life, and they go, I got to do this. I don't care what people think, and then you start doing it for yourself. And that's when you can find friends.
Hmm.
And what you're saying, it's really key to find new friends, find community, and, latch on to people who have the same kinds of questions and stuff, and start a conversation with them.
Hmm.
And you can find a safe haven there usually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So Lisa and I worked hard at building friendships. After we left the church, we lost pretty much all our friends except for a few. And it's very, very painful. She's busy as a nurse working full time.
so let me just get this straight. When you left the Vineyard Church, you lost a lot of friends. Was there any was there any sense of like, okay, you don't fit exactly, but we still love you and we want to be friends with you anyway? Was any of that going on?
No,
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 that's
it was,
my experience too. Yeah.
it was, it was hasta la vista, baby. It was over.
Yep.
And, we've restored a couple of friendships, uh, literally maybe one or two friendships. The rest are gone.
Yep.
And we've built new friendships, and it's hard work, but we've done it, and we we have enough friends to keep ourselves busy and in fellowship with other people. But yeah, it's hard work, but it's got to be done. I tried alternatives. I tried different things like joining different like groups or clubs or whatever, but nothing came close to what I experienced in the church. And so I've sort of given up on that kind of community for many reasons. That's a whole other topic. But we're very happy getting together with friends, and that's filled us. But also back in 2012, I'd been out of the ministry for a couple of years, and I realized, and I was using the word deconstruction quite a bit, and realizing people were resonating with this. And so I started an online community called The Lasting Supper.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's still going, and it's a wonderful place of fellowship for me. It's online. People say it's not the same, but it's valuable to me. I have real deep friendships there they've been there since the beginning, and many of them, and it's still growing, and it's a thing, so it's if you can't find a local community, there are online communities, and also just work hard to make friends somehow.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yep. So you have a book that just came out called Flip It Like This.
Yeah.
And it's a book of cartoons.
Yes, my best loves.
And so what makes that different from your other cartoons and work? What's your goal for this book?
I have that was my 11th book. So I have several cartoon books, but they were sort of cartoons up to this point in my career as a cartoonist. I have a book on LGBTQ cartoons called The Art of Coming Out. I have a book on deconstruction. I have a book on marriage and deconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, a publishing company approached me and asked if we could work together on a best of cartoon book.
Oh, okay. It's the best
And
of,
so
right.
I had to go through about 5,000 cartoons and distill it down to about 135 cartoons. That was really, really hard.
Wow.
But it's my best cartoons, plus 15 never before seen. So yeah, it was fun, and it's a fun book. People are loving it, and sharing it with other people, and leaving it on their coffee table or in their bathroom or in their guest room, or giving it to their in-laws or ex-pastors or things like that.
No, that's a great idea. Giving it to people that you might want. Hey, hint, hint.
Yeah.
You might get some good ideas out of this. Right.
Yeah.
That's great. I didn't realize you had 15 books. Wow.
No, not 15, 11.
Oh, 11 books. Yeah. Wow. That's
But I
still
got
a
a
lot.
couple more in the works, and
Yeah.
I'll be at 15 soon enough.
Right. You'll be at 15. Right. Okay. Good. So we talked a little bit about like what people struggle with, fear and finding community. But those aside, what are some of the most pressing issues today in faith deconstruction that you think,
Okay.
because of today's, how different from 10 years ago or 20 years ago,
The thing about deconstruction is that for me, it's just normal spiritual growth. This is just normal, healthy thing. It's like growing
Right.
pains. When we grow physically, it hurts, it aches. It's the same spiritually. It's not a big deal. This is normal, healthy. It's the people who are suspicious of deconstruction, those preachers out there and teachers and online influencers and anti-deconstructionists and everything that are against it, that are trying to scare people that this is a bad thing, that they're being led astray, or it's demonic, or displeasing God, or backsliding, or anything like that. And so that's one of the big things that I'm reacting against today, is that whole philosophy that this is some kind of a progressive woke movement. It's not. It's just normal spiritual growth. We're just calling it deconstruction because that's what it looks like and feels like.
Yeah. Right. No, it's true.
Yeah. And so here's the thing though. spiritual growth has always happened. But before, you either had to hide it,
Mm-hmm.
or if you let it out, you had to leave
Yes.
or get
Right.
kicked out.
Yeah.
Those were the only two things: shut up or get
Yep.
out.
Yep.
And now people aren't willing as much to shut up, and they're more willing to get out.
Yeah.
And this is disturbing to the institution. It's unsettling that people are so willing to speak up and speak their minds and own their voices, and secondly, that they're so willing to leave so easily. And for an institution that has enjoyed centuries of guaranteed membership and growth from birth, from births from within the community, to now depending on complete volunteerism, people willing to and wanting to come and stay. I think it's threatening the institutional church right now, and that's
Oh
why
yeah.
there's so much negative stuff about it.
No, that's a great point, and it's so true. That's the big issue today, isn't it? It's just like
Mm.
I've noticed that in the last few years, more and more pushback from the evangelical community. The apologists and the
Yeah,
people who have some kind of a sign on their post. I'm the big academic professor or apologist, or I'm defending the faith. And when the amazing thing is when you listen to what they're saying, in my experience, half of the things they're saying are straw man arguments. Oh, well, we don't really believe that. And then the other half is like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just, you haven't you haven't looked very carefully at these issues. It's so surface, it's so superficial. And they're not willing to do that. I think they still have that fear too.
yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
saw
it's not, go ahead.
I saw some online guy saying that the only reason people are deconstructing is because they want illicit sex.
Yeah, that's a big one too, right? Yeah, yeah. We're just sitting around going, well, you know what? I really want to go out and have sex with all these people, so I think I'm just going to deconstruct and come up with something to justify it. Most people have a totally different story. I mean, it's just like I mean,
Yeah, you can
yeah,
enjoy the same privileges if you were a Southern Baptist pastor.
yeah, right, right. And then
Yeah,
that's the other thing is, oh, well, if I don't have to even deconstruct if I want that. I can do it in the church and get away with it for a while at
that's
least.
a sad, dark joke, but it's true.
It's true. No, it's so no, that's a very big struggle for a lot of people, because there's a fear that goes on in the background, like you said, what if you're wrong? What if I'm going too far? One of them I called Bartophobia. Do you know what Bartophobia is? Fear of becoming Bart Ehrman or Bart
Um,
Campolo. Bart Ehrman, of course, became an agnostic, and Bart Campolo became a atheist humanist. And so there's this fear uh, of going too far, doing this. You're in dangerous ground, and you realize. I mean, for me, it's like, I interviewed Bart Campolo, by the way. He's still practicing the love ethic as far as I'm concerned. Right. Even though he says, I'm not a Christian anymore. He's like, well, he's a humanist chaplain, and he's trying to help people,
yep,
come to terms with how to live their life and find meaning in their life.
yep,
And he encourages people to make loving your neighbor one of the drives in their life, because that brings meaning. Right. So it's, but it just amazes me though that and then on the other side, there's a lot of other people who become stronger Christians. At least they perceive themselves. Hey, you know what? I have people telling me, oh, I'm in love with Jesus more than I ever was after I deconstructed.
mm,
Because I got all this baggage out of the way. I'm just focusing on the
yeah,
love ethic that he taught. Right.
yeah.
But it's an amazing phenomenon. That's for sure.
Could I just say something about that?
Sure. Go ahead.
as an encouragement to somebody who might be feeling that way, because I remember feeling that way. What if I become an atheist, or what if I,
Right. Yeah.
what if I don't feel Jesus anymore, or his presence,
Mhm.
or whatever. You won't. Every step you take, you will take. This is the difference. When you're deconstructing, you're outside from under authority. There's no umbrella. There's no covering. There's no accountability. There, you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
that freedom that deconstruction brings. But the thing is, you won't go anywhere without you taking that step. And so right now you might be afraid of where you end up, but just try to put that aside. Don't think about it, because wherever you end up, you took the steps to get there. And
Yeah.
this,
Yeah. No one's going to be forcing you to become an atheist or
no.
something. Right.
And so
And
wherever
there's
you end
plenty
up,
of people who have deconstructed who are not atheists. There's plenty of
yeah,
them.
yeah, that's right.
Believe me.
And wherever you end up, you will be happy that you're there.
Yeah.
Every
Right.
step. Don't take a
Right.
step unless you feel the freedom and the joy and the release to do so. So,
Right.
and here's a surprising thing: is wherever you will end up, you'll realize you were there the whole time. It's just you. You're
Yeah.
going to meet
Right.
yourself, your more
Yeah.
authentic self,
Yeah.
and that's a beautiful thing.
No, that's definitely true. I found that um, going back to my before I got indoctrinated in the evangelical church. It was like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to think like I did before then, and there was parts of that me that I forgot all about. Right,
Right, right.
so it's really cool.
It is.
Um, um, so one of the other questions I had was, what do you think are the most, let's say, destructive views that that some Christians have that are really mentally and emotionally unhealthy that you've discovered?
I think for me, it's not necessarily a Christian thing; it's a human thing. Um, where, like, because I don't believe theology shapes us as much as we have a disposition, and we find a theology that supports that,
Hmm.
and then that creates this vicious cycle of confirmation bias. And but I believe our own personality and trauma and all this kind of thing finds a theology that suits it.
Hmm.
And so, one of the distressing things that we see happening right now is very, very hateful, cruel, even murderous attitudes in the church that they think is totally fine.
Yeah.
But that's a human problem, right? We see it everywhere. But the church somehow has that extra layer of religious confirmation bias,
Yes. Right. Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Like.
And it doesn't matter how many verses there are on love your neighbor. Jesus came with a sword, so
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But he
let
was
it take.
he's a God is just also wrathful and
That's
judgment. Is coming in judgment. Right. Right. No, that's true.
that's the
Yeah.
big concerning thing, is the
Yeah.
confirmation bias that the church is living in right now. And the problem with that is that it's like a snowball. It gains weight and it gets worse, and as it sinks lower. And
No. That's definitely true.
hmm,
I mean, that's one of the things I address in Breaking Bad Faith is that you've got this
right.
two-faced God, and then certain times, the two-faced God, the violent, hateful, retributive God raises its ugly head, and you're focusing on that more than the loving God.
Hmm.
And people haven't learned to differentiate between the two
Hmm.
and discard the ugly one and the retributive one. And if they still believe, to embrace the loving one, it's just. But
Yeah.
and I think that's what Jesus was doing. He was deconstructing that. He was tearing down the violent, retributive type God, character of God, and trying to reveal what God was really like.
Hmm.
But yeah, and especially today with the Israel-Hamas war going on, and people, you know, taking sides, and just the politics that's gotten very retributive in nature. It's the us versus them mentality that people have, and they're starting, really taking it out on them, and because you're not us, and we, they don't even try to love their enemies anymore. Sometimes it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So,
truly.
What about where you are today? Where are you at spiritually? And, what have you done with Jesus in your own spirituality?
I came up with an analogy. I don't know if this is original with me, but this is something I've come up with. I want to share it sometime in a video, but it's fascinating to me how the more I dive into the deep end of, say, theology, mystical theology. I'm talking like Meister Eckhart and other mystical theologians and saints, desert fathers, whatever. And then I'm also reading quantum physics and science. And when they start talking around this whole unified field theory and Einstein, and then, philosophy, philosophers, living and dead, and then, Eastern philosophy, Sufism, Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, Tibetan Buddhism, etc. They all start sounding like they're trying to explain the same thing. Slightly words, but sounds like, and I compare that to like the hub. And then there's spokes going off. They're and each of these are religions or ideologies or whatever. And then there's the rim that holds it all together. And here's the thing about, let's say Christianity is one of these spokes. The closer you get to the hub, the more unifying it sounds. The further away from the hub, the more distinctive it is and exclusive it is.
Yes, exclusive. Yes. Yeah.
And that's the same with all religions. The more fundamentalist they sound, the more separate they are. But the more unifying they sound, it's closer to the unifying idea. That's where I'm at. That's what I'm trying to
Right. Okay.
discern. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that that illustration of the wheel and the spokes. That makes sense.
But you can't throw, like, you need the rim. Something holds it all together. But I mean, this all makes the wheel. This all makes it go round. I'm not. Right. I don't believe in a world religion or anything like that. I believe in the distinctives. I think we should all have our distinctives. I don't believe that we should all be one race. I believe in different races and different colors and different cultures and different societies and different beliefs. And diversity is what, makes a healthy community, not homogeneity. And if we can learn to work together as a diversity rather than a homogeneity, I think life's way more exciting and way more loving and way more realistic. And even though it feels impossible at times, I think it is possible, and it's beautiful when it works. So the spokes and everything and the hub, it all works together. But that's what I'm interested in, is how all these different spokes or streams or whatever you want to call it sort of come together, merge together, and are trying to describe the same unifying thing.
That makes sense. And I think it's possible. I mean, I've seen it happen where, Christians and multi-faith communities or something get to that point. Oftentimes it's hard to get there because you got to get past the fundamentalist part. And you can't do it unless you get past that. And then if you do, you can actually do it. So, right. So David, this has been a wonderful conversation. We ran out of time.
Thank you.
So we'll, really appreciate you having you on and sharing your story. And we'll put some of the links to your work in the show notes. And do you have a particular website you want us to promote?
Yeah, NakedPastor.com is my base camp. And
All right,
if you tell your guests, if they use the coupon code podcast, they can get 10% off anything in my shop, like any of my.
Oh, great. Okay.
So podcast, they get 10% off. But NakedPastor.com is my home base. But my most interesting account with the biggest followers and all that kind of thing is my Instagram account. But I'm Naked Pastor across the board, so you can find me.
All right. NakedPastor.com and on Instagram, NakedPastor. Okay. So thanks again, David. And
You're
folks,
welcome.
Yep. Folks, until next time, the next episode coming up, enjoy responsibly.